All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I would like to thank everyone for joining today's Red Talk webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. Please make sure to stay on mute throughout the duration of the webinar. If you have a question, enter it into the chat function within WebEx, and we will make sure it gets answered. We'll start off with a brief intro about Red 8 and our solutions. And then pass it over to DataPrize for a presentation around cyber response planning and how to respond in the first 24 hours and beyond. So with all of that out of the way, I will pass it over to Brian Jones, Director of Managed Services here at Red 8.
All right, thank you very much, Yvette. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to those on the West Coast, and good afternoon to the folks who are out here in the East. This is Brian Jones. I am Red 8's Director of Managed Services. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the managed services industry for over 25 plus years. With Red 8, I'm responsible for the build out, the continual service improvement, and transition to service delivery for all of Red 8's managed services. Before I turn this presentation over to DataPrize, who I'm extremely excited to have with us on the call today. They are one of the top 10 managed service providers in the nation, and definitely one of our strategic and most valued partners. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Red 8. I'm going to talk about who we are as a family of companies, what practices make up our IT and consulting organization, and then what the advantage is of partnering with Red 8. All right, so for those of you who may not be familiar with Insight Investments, we have 5 brands that make up the Insight family of brands. Just to be respectful of time on the call today, I'm only going to talk about 3 of them. So first one is Insight Financial Services. Insight Financial Services is the nation's largest privately held IT leaser. We have over 1.25 billion in assets on book. What Insight Financial Services allows us to do, it allows us to create a variety of consumable financial models for all of our customers. So as you go through our organization and look to acquire their services or equipment, we can finance a purchase for you. We can lease you IT equipment. We can come up with some creative things. We can do IT as a service. We can also provide cloud-like consumption models. So being our own bank really gives us the freedom to do things that some other organizations may not be able to provide. Second gear, the second item on the left-hand side, is one of the nation's largest IT refurbishment organizations. They are also the operational arm and deliver services for our device lifecycle management offering. That offering is where we handle all the IT and logistics for your new hire deployments, your device replacement, and your separation activities. All of our device lifecycle management is done out of our purpose-built 37,000 square foot technology center, which is located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The organization which I belong to, which is Red 8, is primarily a services organization. We offer both professional and managed services, as well as we operate as a traditional VAR, with the ability to sell hardware, software, and cloud. If you're looking where our offices are located, where you kind of can find us, we do have 16 major locations throughout the United States. We also have a total of 24 locations when you account for some of our smaller offices across the U.S. And we also have operations that are in the Philippines. So we are a nationwide provider, and probably in your backyard. All right, on this slide here, I want to talk about the practices and what we have for each of our technology stacks kind of within Red 8. So for each practice, our organization is basically built out where we have a director for each of the practices, and then we kind of have a team of individuals working underneath them. So over the last 20 years or so, Red 8 kind of grew up in the data center space. That's more of what you would think of as your traditional IT with your networking, your virtualization, your storage, your compute. In our data center practice, we have a team of 35 solutions architects, each with a decade or more experience. So really the foundation of where our organization started quite some time ago. But as all good things, we've come to evolve. So we now have workforce enablement, which deals with all of the items around remote workforce. That's where our device lifecycle offering sits. For that, our device lifecycle management offering, we have a team of 75 plus full-time employees that are dedicated to the service delivery and the customer service for that offering. You're looking at one of our next larger groups is our cybersecurity and compliance, right? We have a director of security for that as well, who can help you identify and address all of your security needs there. And then his team of 15 to 20 engineers, they can come through and become hands-on keyboard and deliver our services for you. And we have a similar type presence in both of our DevOps and our cloud offering, as well as our group that handles our AI and analytics. All right, so this slide is my favorite slide. We briefly talked about how we can finance these services in a variety of ways. That's going to be leveraging our Insight Financial Services. We just talked about our expertise, that we bring to the table for our practices and all the engineering resources. And this slide kind of helps customers understand and highlight all of our available delivery models to kind of help you eliminate the IT burdens that your organization may be facing. So if you start at the bottom, either with Red 8 resources or kind of through our vetted and highly experienced partner networks, we can help augment your team through our resource management. So if you need somebody more of a staff aug capability, we could certainly do that, both in a remote or on-site model. For the next stack there for managed services, if you're looking just to completely eliminate and offload your IT burden, we can come in and provide you a fully managed service that is 24/7, includes monitoring, includes all the maintenance, includes access to all of our engineering resources as well. And then if you're just looking for something to act as an extension of your team, provide some experience, expertise, or just some staff augmentation from resources from a skill sets perspective, we also have the ability to do some consulting and professional services. So really just 4 different delivery methods to completely enhance and augment your existing staff. So for now, I'm going to pass over to my colleagues at DataPrize so we can hear about how you should respond in the event of a ransomware attack. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to attend this for us.
All right, thank you, Brian. I will share our deck here. All right, can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Presentation mode. We see it in
Gotcha.
not presentation or a full screen.
All right.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you very much. All right, so a little bit about DataPrize. Give me just 1 second. I actually need to apologize. This is actually hiding something that I need on another screen. Give me just 1 second. This way. So about DataPrize, DataPrize was founded in 1995. Today, we are the leading strategic IT solutions provider to mid-market IT leaders who believe that technology should allow you to be the best at what you do. DataPrize's unbeatable IT solutions and services are tailored to the needs of strategic CIOs and provide best-in-class managed security, network infrastructure, collaboration, mobility, and end user solutions. So we, as you can see here, founded in 95. We've got over 1,000 active total clients, a deep technical bench of over 300 employees, and support over 2,500 technical consultants. So our agenda for today for this talk about the current threat landscape and some common attacks that we're seeing here in 2021. Some layers of defense that you can use to protect your organization, planning and training for incidents. The overarching theme of this is really we want to help you prepare for the first 24 hours of an incident. And then talking through what happens once you have an incident and responding to a data breach. So the current threat landscape. 2020 saw a huge uptick in ransomware with many high-profile incidents that affected millions of people. Every 10 seconds in 2020, this trend is actually anticipated to go up in 2021. Already through where we are throughout this year, we've seen a number of very high-profile incidents as well involving ransomware. The trend is showing no sign of stopping. In fact, malicious emails are up over 600% because of COVID and using COVID as a way to entice people into opening or clicking on things. Their FBI has received almost 2,500 ransomware complaints, and that is an increase of 20% over the prior year. Average payouts are going up as well. 2021 saw the largest ransomware payout ever at $40 million. So that's a staggering number. In 2020, the average ransomware payout is around $300,000. And the average downtime for a company that we're seeing is around 21 days. So ransomware continues to be one of the most prevalent things that we're seeing from an attack perspective, even though there are a number of others that are concerning as well. Some of these other attacks include general malware type incidents. These continue to grow and evolve. And right now they're growing and evolving to continue evading detection. There has been several new variants that have come out, several new malware variants that are able to completely bypass endpoint detection using a couple of different techniques. There is even a new variant I was actually just reading about that is now hiding in the memory on your video card. And that is a place that is typically out of bounds for things like endpoint scanning and protection. But because memory cards tend to have very large memory capacities, there is a lot of places to hide and a lot of area to temporarily store files and transact in that malware. Phishing, again, this is often a prelude to ransomware. This is oftentimes how ransomware gets into a network or how an attacker gets into a network. This continues to be a very, very successful attack vector. As I mentioned above, about 1 every 6,000 emails has a malicious link in it. DDoS attacks, while they are still a thing, have not been quite as common as the above attack vectors. And I believe that to be that the above 3 are very successful in their own right and are allowing access into environments where attackers are really looking to take information, financial data, personal health data, and have not been quite as prolific with just disturbing or taking things down. So layers of defense, what can we do now that we know the types of attacks that are out there? One of the biggest things that you can do is honestly patching vulnerabilities. Latest estimates and reports are showing that on average, it's taking up to 200 days to patch vulnerabilities. Attackers are exposing these and exploiting them way faster than most people are patching them. And so this continues to be one of the largest vectors for getting into an environment is exploiting vulnerabilities, especially older vulnerabilities. It is not entirely not uncommon when we're conducting vulnerability assessments on client environments to find vulnerabilities that are 3, 5, even 10 years old that are out there and have not been patched or updated. Advanced endpoint protection. This is one of my favorite layers of defense. And the reason that is because in our common or our current COVID world, where everybody is now working from remote locations, we're not often afforded the layers of security that were built into the traditional enterprise because you're not accessing things from behind that corporate firewall anymore. You're at home. Your users are at home, they're accessing things through their own private internet connection. So protecting that endpoint is a really important step. That home network has a lot of other unknown devices with unknown security hygiene. So if we can protect the corporate endpoint, if we can protect our own personal endpoints with an advanced endpoint solution, that is going to give us a fighting chance at detecting something on that endpoint and helping us to shut that down. A lot of advanced endpoint also gives us the ability to isolate a machine. And so that helps in a couple of capacities. One, it'll help prevent the spread of anything further that may be on an endpoint. It also helps us preserve forensic data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we want to leave the machine on and running to keep all of the contents of memory live and intact without shutting it down and risking the loss of valuable data that could be used to determine the cause or the scope of the impact of an incident. Automated backups. Since we did talk on the prior slide about how prevalent phishing and ransomware are, automated backups are going to be an absolute key to your security strategy. If you get infected with ransomware, if you have no backups of your systems, the options are extremely limited with what you can do to recover from that incident. However, if you do have a safe and secure backup that you can recover from, you can literally tell ransomware attackers to pound sand and take your time, restoring your business from your backups. Now, that being said, having backups on site or on-prem commingled with the rest of your hardware is not the most secure posture for that. We do recommend either offline or off-site immutable backups to ensure that if you are breached, if attackers do have the ability to gain access to the internals of your corporate network, that they are not able to destroy your backups. This is often the very first thing that they look for because they know that it is the largest advantage you have in not paying that ransom. So please make sure that you have at least an offline immutable or off-site immutable backup that cannot be accessed or tampered with should you have a breach. SOC monitoring, this is going to be a very important and mature step in your security program. Whether you insource or outsource this capability, this is going to give you the ability to have early and rapid identification of a security incident as it's happening, or quite possibly before it's happened. So detecting the ability to detect the things that your security logs are logging is crucial. This is likely where your investigation is going to take place, is in your SIEM or security log aggregation capability. And not having this is kind of akin to having a castle, but leaving the drawbridge down and the front door open. If you've got a lot of tools, but you're not paying attention to what they're saying, you're not looking at them for incident detection, the tools will only do so much. The analysis and the correlation of those log events across your tool set is really going to be key to the continued success of your security program. And then last here, and not last because it is least important, is security awareness training. And this is the thing that we like to harp on quite a bit, that the users are often the weakest part of the puzzle. And so we need to provide them some training. An annual training program is good. Being able to mix some things in there like simulated phishing training, videos that are dripped to the users throughout the year and not just kind of a one and done scenario, I think are much more effective. I was actually just asked prior to coming to this webinar why, even though we're doing security awareness training, things like phishing emails and ransomware attacks are still so successful. And I think it's just that not exposing users to real world techniques, the actual real world techniques that phishing email campaigns are using, I think is doing our workforce a disservice. So I would highly encourage not only doing more frequent training, but also really exposing them to some simulated phishing emails that are accurate and based on real world campaigns that are out there, to get them the actual experience of seeing one and interacting with it and knowing how to look for certain hallmarks or indicators that this is a phishing email. So planning and training. The best way to start your cybersecurity journey is with a plan and bolstering that with training. So developing an incident response plan, this is going to give you the roadmap for who is going to do what and how when you have an incident. It is best to have this in place ahead of time. The second to last bullet here, conduct tabletop exercises. That's going to leverage that incident response plan. Again, you want to test these things before you have the crisis. And that is really important. I can't say that enough, that having your plan and actually testing it in a calm environment with all of your stakeholders is going to ensure that when the day comes, and it will, that you have to exercise that incident response plan, that you are not trying to figure it out for the first time, and this isn't everybody's first time seeing it. Building your incident response team. Again, once you've got the plan, you're going to need the team to help investigate what happened and help contain and recover from your incident. Identifying who those people are, whether, again, you're insourcing that capability or outsourcing it. If you are outsourcing it, you're likely doing so with a retainer. It would be best to have that retainer in place, have all of your paperwork, your NDAs, all of those things signed and live before you have an incident. That takes valuable time when an incident is raging in your environment, when people are high stress and things are not going well. That is not the time to be negotiating the cost for incident response. Or working through who's going to provide it, cold calling firms to find out who can help you. You want to have this in place now and today. And then again, maintaining a modern backup strategy here. I think this, again, bears repeating. This is going to, regardless of what type of incident you have, whether it is a breach, whether it's an insider threat, whether you have even a natural disaster that you have to implement either a continuity plan or a disaster recovery plan for, your backups are going to be an integral part of your incident response strategy or your disaster recovery strategy. So let's talk step by step for how to respond to a breach. And for this, we are going to take a look at the incident response process. So there are 5 steps here: prepare and discover, detect and analyze, contain, eradicate, and recover. And we'll deep dive a little bit more into these. So on the prepare and discover side, again, this is where we're going to want to make sure we have our incident response plan, make sure it's up to date and accurate. You do need to revisit that periodically to ensure that it is still up to date and accurate as things change in the environment. You're going to want to identify the communications methods for how you're going to handle comms during your incident. If you have a full-on breach and you suspect that a user or an attacker may have compromised, for example, your email platform, email is no longer going to be a viable mechanism for communicating about your incidents because you could potentially have an attacker watching what's happening and learning what you're doing. So it would be best to identify ahead of time any out-of-band communications that you may have, whether you're using something like Signal on your personal emails or your personal cell phones, rather, a personal email address, your personal cell phone numbers. When your IR firm or your IR team meets, that is going to be one of the first things they establish is which comms channels are we going to be using to coordinate the rest of this incident response activity. We're going to need to determine which hardware, software, and resources are going to be needed. So whether you're doing a full forensic investigation and you're going to need forensic workstations, secure media, places to store all of those things, all of these things are things we need to think about prior to having an incident. And then again, ensuring you have the necessary visibility into all of your systems. This comes down to having a good plan for your administrative credentials, and how things are going to function when it's time to begin this investigation. All of these things are going to be, critical to understand for your first 24 hours of an incident. The detection and analysis part, this should be kind of an ongoing piece of the incident response process. I mentioned the SOC monitoring or SIM capability. You need to have a way of detecting that an incident is happening. Some of the important questions to ask once you have identified that we do have an incident is the scope of the incident, which systems are affected, who or what originated the incident, how is it happening? And then document every step taken from the time the incident was detected all the way through its final resolution. This is going to help you build your timeline. Who did what, when, and where, which systems were touched, and that final timeline is going to help you keep this incident organized, as well as the final report to understand what happened. And then prioritizing the handling of your incident. So an incident is composed of multiple different stages, multiple different activities, and we need to prioritize the things that we're doing by the relevant factors, which is we need to analyze the most important systems first, the most critical data first. All of these things are important to the success of your incident response activity. Containment, this is where we're going to stop the bleeding. So if you have an active incident, the containment stage is where we're pulling network plugs, we're isolating endpoints. We need to stop the ability for the attacker to continue this attack. This means that we need to have an understanding of the scope of the incident, the affected systems and resources, and that's going to determine what our containment strategy is, whether that's literally just disconnecting the network POP, shutting down some systems, or just isolating a handful of devices. It's important to collect evidence here as you go along, and again, maintain a log of all of this information, and to keep track of which hosts are initiating the attack and which ones are kind of victims of the attack. Eradication. This is going to be the portion of the incident where we are actually expunging the attacker, getting rid of any malware, toolkits, anything that they may have used to facilitate this attack or this incident. Again, this should be done in a phased approach, and understanding that the very next step here is recovery, so that we're focused on not only cleaning up the incident, but the fact that these systems have to come back online in a timely manner so that we can resume business. And as I alluded to, recovery being the next step here, we need to start talking about restoring from backups. Do we need to rebuild systems from scratch? Depending on the type of incident, the type of attack that we had, we could end up in a situation where we cannot trust that a system can just be re-provisioned. It may need to be completely formatted, wiped, and rebuilt from scratch. We may be talking about replacing just a handful of compromised files, or we could be talking about completely tearing down and rebuilding portions of a network. As part of recovery, once everything is back up and running, we need to ensure that all of our systems and services are functioning. If we took any of our critical business services down, things like email, DNS, any other security services that had to be turned off temporarily, we need to make sure that we've got them turned back on and they are functioning normally. And again, remediating vulnerabilities, the outcome of your investigation may determine that this was a vulnerability that was exploited. If that was the case, we need to make sure that's patched to ensure that it does not happen again. And of course, we need to implement any additional monitoring that may have been identified as a gap for allowing this incident to happen. So with that, my final thoughts here on this are a lot of incidents are absolutely preventable through good security hygiene, good cybersecurity practices, being prepared, patching, and having all of your core systems identified and protected. You can prevent most incidents out there. It's not to say that you can prevent them all. It is absolutely to say that you can absolutely limit the scope of damage to your environment, though. So with that, I will kind of close up here and open it up, I believe, for questions. Thank you very much for having me today. It was a pleasure, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. A couple of questions have come through. What type of visibility into my infrastructure is needed to inform how to respond?
So that is not a black and white question, but you need to understand the critical business systems, any critical data, where it sits, how it's protected. All of these things are going to inform how you respond. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, but it's really about starting from the beginning, understanding the architecture of your network, and again, really having a good inventory for all of your critical assets and data. Give me just 1 second. All right, was there any other questions?
Yes. So one more. How often should I revisit or make changes to my IRPs?
So your incident response plan should absolutely be something that you revisit on a regular basis. At a minimum, I would say annually is probably effective. But really, anytime you make a substantive or significant change to your network, to the way you store data, if you've added any additional critical systems or data, the incident response plan should absolutely be updated to factor all of that in. So again, not a black and white answer. However, I would say a minimum of a year. A lot of things can change in a year, but if you know that you're making significant and rapid changes, maybe you're maturing a bunch of things, maybe you are adding new locations, maybe you made an acquisition, all of these things should factor into how you're going to manage an incident response plan. And so those things should be updated. If you know you're doing things more frequently, take a look at it and review it more frequently.
Great, thank you. Another one, what is the typical engagement look like, and what is the range of cost for an initial engagement?
Oh, that's a great question. So A typical engagement can look very much like what I went through. If you're outsourcing the capability, let's just assume the question is for outsourcing a capability. Hopefully, you have a retainer in place already. I can kind of talk through both tracks really quickly. If you've got a retainer in place and you're using an outside firm, what you're going to do is contact them the moment that you understand something is happening and get them involved. The first thing they're going to do is come in and want to understand what's going on, the scope of the incident, any systems that are involved, and kind of what you know right now. The second thing they're going to want to do is start the containment process. And that is where they're going to either start disconnecting network cables, isolating hosts, and they're going to kind of stop the bleeding so that they can begin their analysis, their investigation, and the recovery portion. Now, if you're talking about this being in an emergency, you have not made this plan ahead of time, you do not have a retainer, you do not have a firm, you're going to spend some time trying to find somebody to do this. You may get a recommendation from another provider you're using or a friend. You're going to have to rapidly work through NDAs. You're going to have to rapidly work through a contract where they're going to provide an estimate of hours, with a certain rate. I will tell you that emergency incident response is always more expensive than doing it through a retainer because they're dropping everything to come to your rescue. Often involves putting people on airplanes in the middle of the night. For whatever reason, incidents seem to favor the middle of the night approach. You can have, between 4 and 12 hours of time where you're negotiating things and trying to get the team spun up and ready. So that's why I say it's much better to have all of these things in place prior to an incident. Now, for an average engagement, I have seen ransomware engagements where the ransomware portion did not quite get executed, so there wasn't much or anything that was encrypted, and that took 100 hours to clean up, 100 hours of incident response time. I have also seen, full-blown everything got encrypted events that were in the multiple hundreds of hours to clean up and analyze and recover from. So it really is very dependent. Incident response engagements can be very expensive. So from a price range, you could be talking tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's a lot of factors in between that make that up: the number of hours, the rate that you're getting, the complexity of the incident, the size of your environment. All of those things are going to make a big difference, along with the number of people that the firm is putting on the case. So lots of variables there, but hopefully that answered the question. They can typically be very expensive endeavors. Cyber insurance can often help with some of those things, but I find one of the best things you can do is really just prepare and understand that this is not a matter of if it happens to you, it's a matter of when. And that's not specifically about ransomware, but just incidents in general. It is a matter of when it will happen to you. And it is always best to be prepared because you can reduce your overall liability. You can reduce the overall risk to the environment. You can reduce your overall cost in triaging and cleaning it up through an incident response engagement. So it is always better to spend a little bit of money up front to prevent these things, or to at least keep your costs down on the backside.
Awesome, thank you. And one more, is there an engagement pre-attack?
Is there an engagement pre-attack? I think that question is asking about, is there something that you need to do before you are attacked? If that is the question, Absolutely. Meeting with your IR firm, if you're retaining an outside incident response firm, you should absolutely meet with them prior to having an incident, so that they have an understanding of what your environment looks like. They've probably got some scoping questions they can ask, just so they have kind of a profile of who you are and what's going on. They can provide some advice as well. Once they understand a little bit more about your environment, they may be able to help guide you through making sure your incident response plan is up to date, making sure that you've got some basic things covered. So I would absolutely recommend, if you are putting all of this together, to have an early engagement before there's an incident. Again, so you can get to know your firm, so they can get to know you. All of these things are going to make dealing with an actual incident better, because the day the incident happens is going to be one of the worst days of your life, and you are going to be stressed, you're going to be upset, and that is does not make the best first impression on everybody. So absolutely, there should be a pre-attack engagement, if that was the question. If not, I apologize and would be happy to answer if you could rephrase.
All right. Well, I sent out a message last call for questions. I haven't gotten anything else, so I think we're good. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining. And please reach out to your sales rep or info@red8.com to continue the conversation. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.